Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Weekly podcast, the show where we interview the top movers and shakers in the crypto industry. Today, I'm joined with the founder and CEO of Greengage Merchant Bank, Sean Kiernan. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mike. Thanks.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And before we talk too much about Greengage, I'd like to just maybe get a gauge on your background. And so I know you came from the financial sector, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you came into the crypto space?
Sure. So I'm American originally, although I probably sound less American these days. So I've been outside a while. I cut my teeth in banking, originally within the division of Credit Suisse, where I ended up moving to the UK in 2010 to get a banking license for that division in the UK, which was a great project, and I loved it. And thereafter, I stayed with that firm, which was eventually acquired by Falcon Private Bank, which was, I think, the first bank in the world to do crypto back in 2017. And I was the CEO of the London office at that stage. And from there, I realized that just the huge demand and potential in the crypto space, particularly from the perspective of a banker, really made me think, how do I mix those two understandings, how to build a bank and how to work with crypto companies? And that was where Greengage was born.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say kind of how to mix those two worlds, because they do seem so, diametrically opposed. Yeah, and I think, what you're doing with Greengage is so well needed. And I don't think people fully understand how big of an issue it is for these emerging crypto companies to get banking, especially in the traditional financial world. So let's talk about Greengage and kind of your approach to that and how you saw a gap in the market.
So the gap I saw at Falcon, and I was getting calls on a daily basis for, can we get a bank account? We have an interest in crypto as a firm. And I think there was just a wall of no from most banks to these more innovative businesses. And what I really got my head around at that time, and we've progressed a lot since, is the unique aspects of, actually, particularly with the public blockchains, you have an additional tool to drill into the counterparty and do full coin forensics and blockchain analysis on that company and see who they deal with in turn. And that's on top of the full standard bank KYC and AML checks. And that to me was thinking ahead, this is the direction of travel, where not only will you use the trends in AI and using multiple data sets to get a handle of who you're going to bank, but also seeing who they deal with in turn. You know your friends and the company you keep show who you are as a person yourself, and it's the same with banking.
And it's funny because there's always this veil of secrecy around cryptocurrency, which I find so, it's counterintuitive, because everything on a public blockchain, as you said, is transparent. And we know that less illicit transactions happen through Bitcoin than through the traditional banking system. So it seems almost like there's a narrative, and it's wanted to be flipped in the direction of the traditional banks.
Yeah, I think there's reasons for that. I mean, a lot of the foundations for the crypto revolution were driven by the libertarian impulse to be independent, and that's all healthy and good. And there are trends within crypto, and privacy coins are a different matter entirely. Again, not that they're bad in principle, but you can't trace them. And even with the public blockchains, the techniques like Lightning on the Bitcoin network make it harder to trace. So there are mitigating factors in the whole analysis, but I think directionally, it's definitely an asset for a firm like us who's trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's also the, I would say the aspect of freedom to open source blockchains. And it's tough to argue with the kind of the libertarian or the freeing nature of being able to open up a Bitcoin account, or being able to, I say, bank the unbanked, right? It's a tough narrative to almost argue against, and it makes me wonder why there's so much animosity with the big bank, the traditional banking system around, you know, the adoption of these technologies?
I mean, I think animosity is quite an emotive word.
Okay, sure. How would you describe it?
I think there's varying rationale. One is just sheer bandwidth. If you're in one of the big banks and you've got a gamut of business that you've got on your plate, and there's this new thing that's a bit unknown, you'd probably just rather say no than yes, because you're taking on a risk you don't understand. I think there have been obviously the initial stages with Mt. Gox and various hacks in crypto firms. That there has been kind of a concern around, are we doing something that facilitates money laundering or terrorist financing? And people, particularly if you're in the role that's an MLRO or a compliance, you don't want to ever put yourself in personal liability if you potentially bend towards a direction that supports those, and that's completely understandable.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, the reason I wanted to open up the discussion was saying the tools at your disposal, if you understand what you're doing, actually make this much more comfortable as a sector than some others. And I don't want to compare crypto necessarily to other industries in that way, but from my perspective, I feel very comfortable with it. But that's from years of working with the underlying technology, understanding the actors in the space, and having a really good team of people that not just within Greengage, but with our partners, that helps us to decipher the good and the bad.
Yeah. And you made a really good point there, talking about the evolution of the crypto space, because, you know, it is still so nascent, but it has come a long way in the past decade. And, you know, you talked about Mt. Gox, where traditionally this might have been the only place you could store your crypto, and it was a centralized exchange, right? And the industry has come so far since then. And what a great segue to start, you know, discussing what you're doing at Greengage, because these are truly the next steps, the next pillars or building blocks that the kind of financial revolution will be built on.
And I'm very happy to be a bit of the plumbing. I think there are really interesting things happening, not just in traditional crypto as such, but in the DeFi space. And all of these need some bridge into the fiat world, and what better place to do that than a bank, in my view. But I'm also very clear in terms of our business. We will give bank accounts when we have the bank license. We're going for a license in Gibraltar as we speak. But our business is more focused on the balance sheet activities. Our intention is, of course, to facilitate transactions and payments. And the core two things that banks always do is liquidity and the pricing of risk. I think liquidity is something, particularly in crypto, that is geared to be much more efficient in terms of making payments. And we've seen what's happened in China with the likes of WeChat and Alipay, and they're doing fascinating things in terms of reducing that frictional cost of moving money around. And the West, I still think, has to catch up with some of those innovations. And I think crypto will play a part with that. But those balance sheet activities and the pricing of risk, I think, is actually the remit of what a bank should be doing. And so that's really the focus for us. We will take deposits from crypto companies, and we intend to lend those fiat deposits in turn to SMEs with a view towards eventually creating digital debt products to basically get a bond for an SME if they wanted to raise a larger amount of money we couldn't fund ourselves, and package that as a digital product that we can then issue in the capital markets. And that's going to take a while to roll out, but that's the vision.
It might take a while, but so well needed, right? And time is all relative, right? So in the scale of how historic this type of technology breakthrough is, you know, what's a couple months or years. You talked about the major functions of a bank being liquidity and pricing of risk. Can you talk a little bit about how blockchains might help with the pricing of risk, given the you know, smart contracts and the ability to mitigate a lot of that counterparty risk?
It's a good question, and it's a tricky question to answer. I think, of course, the frictional cost if smart contracts can reduce, say, the legal fee the counterparty risk, as you can see at the other end of the trade, exactly what's at the end of say collateral or who the counterparty is. There are risks that are new in that we've seen some DeFi protocols can be hacked, some cryptos can be hacked, and the custodians, if you are using a custodian, there's also a whole new level. But there are ways to mitigate those risks with insurance, and that's also evolving very quickly. I think for us, that pricing of risk is something that directionally has been happening already in traditional banking in a more efficient way. We've seen some banks come up with AI-driven models to automate the credit process of underwriting and getting your head around, is a counterparty going to give me that interest income or eventually pay back the proceeds of the loan in time? That process, I think the blockchain and the evolution of DeFi particularly is one of the more interesting spaces for us to watch. And here we're an early watcher, I would say, but we're not engaging yet in DeFi. There's a lot that still needs to happen for a firm that wants to be a bank, let alone a bank, to engage. And primarily, I think it's AML KYC risk. We don't know yet exactly who's playing on the platforms. And there's a question around if you go for, say, a walled garden approach, or if you do more of a whitelist model on DeFi. But we're very keenly keeping our ears to the ground and watching the space, because we think, particularly as a first mover bank, if we are able to do that engagement, the interest rates that banks are able to pay on deposits today are quite low, and that's driven by the central bank policies to a large extent. But if we're able to achieve higher interest rates by using the new techniques in DeFi opens up, let alone more traditional blockchain-based solutions, we think that could be quite attractive for depositors.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems, I understand, and I think it seems like the natural progression of finance. And history goes in cycles, and the way I look at the yields that we're getting these days in DeFi, even stable 8 to 12%, these are what you used to get in a savings account in the 1940s or 50s, right? And so this is just the kind of the next generation of money technology, and it's allowing for those higher types of yields. But I guess the biggest roadblock standing in the way of moving into the DeFi space would be regulation. And you said you are in the process of getting a banking license in Gibraltar, and so I'd like to understand a little bit about why you chose to make that decision, and what some of the regulations in Gibraltar are for crypto and digital assets.
Gibraltar is a fascinating place. It was the first mover jurisdiction in the world in 2017 to come up with bespoke legislation for bringing crypto within the regulatory perimeter. And they're also quite careful. It's a small jurisdiction. It's roughly 35,000 people. They're not geared for allowing any firm to establish on the ground. They're looking for a small subset of good firms, and we'd be delighted, of course, to receive the regulatory permission and get off the ground. We also took comfort that there are other players already in Gibraltar that are quite big, probably more European names. LMAX, a crypto exchange for more institutional parties, is based there, as well as Bitso, the big Latin American exchange, has a headquarters in Gibraltar. And most recently, Zappo got a bank license, and they're very retail focused, and we think that's a fantastic market. But our focus is B2B, so we thought it would be a nice complementary offering in the market for the companies, and hopefully for international business as well.
Amazing, amazing. So I know you're in the process of getting the banking license, but if somebody wanted to, open up an account with Greengage, would they be able to do so today?
We are opening up some accounts today, but it's not for the bank. We've got, this is our UK side of the business. We have an introducing broker business to facilitate loans against crypto, primarily with family office and private equity houses in the background. So we do have a full onboarding engine, and we are, I wouldn't say approving them for bank accounts because we're not registered to do so, but we've built up a database of good interest for when we launch.
Amazing, amazing. And is there any insight on the when that launch might happen, or?
We hope next year, but I mean, this is it's in the regulatory process as we speak, and we have to jump through hoops to do it properly.
Mhm.
And we actually want a robust process because we know that we deserve it when we do get it. Should we get it?
Yeah, always better to do things right the first time, right? And if people wanted to learn a little bit more about Greengage and what you guys are out to accomplish, how would they do so?
By listening to your webcast. Yeah, we have, I mean, some content on our website. We're increasingly putting out white papers. We just put up one on the Bank of England's CBDC consultation exercise. And we're doing one upcoming with the UK Parliament, all-party parliamentary group on blockchain, so I'd say, APPG blockchain, which is a kind of a systematic mapping of the UK crypto space. But looking at Gibraltar and the US as well in terms of comparisons. We haven't included Canada. Next time.
Hopefully soon.
Yes.
Well, the link to the Greengage website will be in the description. And Sean, I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I look forward to seeing what comes next for Greengage.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
Thank you.